Okay, so the first thing we're going to go through is magnetic mat. That's that. Basically, whenever you're going to be doing a repair, you need to use this mat. A lot of iPhones have dozens of screws, and they're all different. Every single screw is different except for the 2 bottom screws and the 4 internal screws which holds the screen together. Everything else is different. You need to make sure that everything is taken out and put in order. The issue is, when you take them apart, if you just mix them up into piles and you're trying to remember where they go, you probably won't get the right screw in the right hole. If you tipped all the screws out in a pile, you can look at them and you'll see there's lots of different screws, but then some of them, there's only just slight differences between them, slight differences in length and also the width of the screw, but you might not necessarily be able to tell that with your naked eye, because there are really, really small holes. So pretty much what you'll do is you'll take all the parts out one by one, lay out the parts in order, and just keep switching between the squares until everything's out that you need to take apart. And then you'll go from there.
Right.
Okay, so next on the screw list is the Phillips crosshead. That is the standard iPhone screwdriver. That does 95% of all the screws in the iPhone, and it's definitely your most common used screwdriver. Obviously in other brands, Nokia and Sony for example, they don't use that as much, but for iPhones they exclusively use that screwdriver. So the next screwdriver is going to be the pentalobe screwdriver. That's the standard iPhone opening screwdriver. The bottom 2 screws on all of the iPhones are going to use that screwdriver head. The very first generation of the iPhone 5, for the first few million that they made, they did use a Phillips crosshead. So you obviously need to keep that with you as well. But 99% of the time, you're going to be using that screwdriver for all the iPhones. The iPhone 4, the 5 series, and even the 6 series as well, they still use that same screwdriver. Obviously, the one thing you do need to be careful of, if you look at the tip of it, it's a small star. It's very, very fine. So when you're actually going to screw in the screws, you're going to plug it in to the screw head, and then you're going to turn very, very slowly. Otherwise, you're going to end up stripping out the end of your screwdriver or the actual screw in the phone itself. So you do have to be quite slow and delicate with that. Next screwdriver is going to be a terminal screwdriver, so a flathead screwdriver. In the iPhones, they tend to have 1 or 2 screws which will use that head on it, and it's normally part of a multi-screw head. You'll have 1 screw screwed through the housing into the circuit board, and then on top of that you'll have a component which is screwed in with another screw straight into the first screw. So there's usually 1, there's a couple of models which do have 2 in it. Obviously when we're doing the demonstrations we'll explain which is which. Okay. Next screwdrivers are going to be the T5, T6, there's also a T3 and a T4. You don't really use these in iPhones. You can occasionally use a T3. If somebody's been inside of an iPhone before and they've damaged the screw head, you'll tend to find that the newer Phillips head doesn't work on it, and you'll need to switch. Usually a T3 will work, if not sometimes a T4. Right, next one we have is the iSesamo. This is probably one of the best opening tools you can get. You can pretty much use this for all of your repairs when you're trying to prise anything apart or slide it in to the casing or the screen to take it apart. It's got a very thin tip on the end of it, and it's quite strong. It's flexible enough where you can put quite a bit of force to slowly lever something out, but it's nice and soft. It's not really got sharp edges or anything where you're not going to damage anything or scratch any of the housing or the screen or anything like that. So it's a very good tool, and we're using that quite a lot. Next ones are the nylon tie tool, which is just a plastic pick. There's a flat end on that end and then a sharp pick on the other side. You're going to be using that if you're dealing with metal housings. So on the iPhone 5 series, they have a soft aluminium frame on those. It's very easy to scratch with metal tools. So once you've started lifting out the screen or any of the other parts, you might have to switch to a plastic tool to avoid obviously scratching everything. And then also the sharp pick on the other end, you're going to be using that for a few components which need just a very fine pick just to lift that component out, and avoid you shorting out anything with a metal tool. So there's quite a few situations where you'll switch over to that. They are quite fragile, the ends on them, because obviously they're so thin it's plastic, they tend to snap off. So those can be ordered in bulk, hundreds or thousands, and they're only a few pence each when you're ordering in bulk, so you can get quite a lot of those. It's definitely worth having a lot. So the next one is going to be the metal pry tool. That's a lot more rigid. If you're taking a screen apart, for example, and you get stuck, if it's been dropped a lot, then you might find that the frame is dented or bent inwards, and you can't actually pull it out of the phone, at which point you're going to switch over to a much stronger and tougher tool to start lifting out. You can put a bit more pressure behind trying to pull it out. It's quite sharp, so you do have to be careful around cables, flexors, and also the housing, which you'll tend to find if you're going to scratch it with anything, it'll be with this tool, so you do need to take a little bit more care with this one. But you tend to use it quite a lot, lifting out certain parts. What you'll find, if you get a really, really heavy damaged phone, if it's smashed up the edging of the casing, of the housing or anything else, usually you can use that tool just to file down the edging a little bit, just to make it so that your new screw is going to
Sarah here,
no, that's just for grip, just for decoration. It's not really got any use to it. It's just to stop it from slipping out and piercing something or scratching something. So okay. Next one is the long handled pry tool. You tend to use this one when you're lifting out batteries, or if you've got a screen which is jammed in along the top edges, and you'll just need something a little bit longer to stick it through the housing and through the screen to the other side, where you can't normally get your fingers to it, and you can just start levering it out. They're very good for batteries, and you can usually use 2 or 3 of those to lift out a stubborn battery. If the pull tabs have been torn out, you can just lever 2 or 3 of those into the side of the casing and just pull all 3 at the same time, and it'll pull out the battery quite easily. They do sometimes have a sharp edge on this one. You do have to watch out for that one when you're taking the battery out, to make sure you get the rounded edge rather than the sharp pointed edge, just to make sure you don't actually pierce the battery. They're quite toxic, and they do spit out acids and they can burn you, so you've just got to be really careful of that. Okay, so next ones are going to be plastic pry tools. These pretty much serve the same purpose as the nylon pry tools, just with different angles and shapes, just to help you get into little nooks and crannies that you can't quite get into with the other tools. Guitar plectrums are probably one of the best tools to use. You can get obviously different sizes and different thickness, and they're pretty handy. If you're struggling with square tools, just for the metal pry tool for example, you might find a curved tip plastic tool would better, just to get an angle for lifting out certain parts. And obviously you can just alternate between your tools and choose whatever's best for the situation, because all of them are slightly different. Different components are stuck in differently, or they're stuck in more than one position, so you might be using 2 of the tools at once just to get the right angle so you can lift everything out safely. Okay, next tool will be a dental pick. This isn't used very often, but it does come in handy. What you find is you get a sharp end, a sharp pick, but you'll find that it's rounded and it's very flat on the inside, so it isn't going to pierce anything. You tend to use this for cleaning the edging inside the casing. Around the aluminium frame there's a little ledge which fills up with grime and dirt. You'll be using this just to scrape all of that out so you can actually get your new screen sitting in and flush, and you're not going to get any of the dirt coming out of that edging, so you get a nice sharp finish on it. You can occasionally use the larger head to take apart iPhone 5 series docks. Sometimes you'll need to put a pick inside the hole and then turn it like a key, and it'll just lever out some of the components, and it just makes it a lot easier for using that tool rather than one of the plastic tools or one of the metal tools. Okay, so next one is going to be the iSlack, or a suction cup. When you're taking an iPhone apart, you're going to want to use a suction cup if possible. Now, if a screen is completely shattered, it's not going to stick. You won't get an airtight seal on it. So what you might need to do is tape the actual screen down with sellotape, or you can get LCD tape, and you basically just put a sheet of that over the screen, and then you can use the 2 suction cups. If a screen is cracked just at the top edge, or it's not cracked at all and you're doing another repair that isn't screen related, you should use the ice lap first. That'll lift out the screen perfectly every time, no pressure on anything else. There's no chance of you damaging anything, so that's definitely the best option. If a screen is broken, obviously you've got to tape it. This won't stick to it at all, so you'll have to switch to a suction cup, which will work the same, it's just a little bit harder to get it out, and you'll combine that with a plastic pry tool to lift it out as well, all in one motion. Okay, just to show you the sellotape for using the screen, you can get LCD tape, which is just literally a huge roll of adhesive. That's going to stick down on top of the screen, and you can use that for using the opening tools, or if you want to avoid cutting yourself. If you've got a screen which is completely shattered over, you can find it quite easy to cut your fingers or your wrists if you're touching the edges of it. So you want to tape it over first just to avoid injury to yourself. Okay. Next tools are going to be the eye holds. Basically, it's a clamp and a holder for phones. You get iPhone 5 Series 1 and you get the iPhone 6 Series 1. And basically, the phone will slot in. You can unscrew the bottom screws and lift the screen up, and it'll plug into these 2 compressors here. And if you're only replacing, for example, a battery or a charging port or a loudspeaker, something like that, then you can just lift the screen up, press it in, it's going to be held there safe. You don't actually have to start taking any of that apart, so there's no risk of damaging anything else. And then at the bottom of the phone, you can just work through whatever part you need to repair, remove, whatever your repair is. The iPhone 6 Series 1 obviously works the same, just larger. There isn't a 6 Plus version yet, but they will be releasing one soon. I think definitely the 6 one is the better one to use. It's more commonly used, because obviously the screen's so fragile. It's a lot bigger screen, so you just put that out of the way, so everything's nice and safe, and you just do what you need to do to get your repair done.